And we are up and running, bright and sunny today here in the Midwest, and a nice respite from the ongoing gloom down here at the tip of Lake Michigamme. How are you this morning, Barrett?
I'm doing pretty good, pretty good. Happy to have that sunshine. As you said earlier, it's come with a bit of a chill. I think we're definitely below freezing today, but that is the norm for February in the Midwest.
Yes, especially around the Great Lakes area. That big body of water definitely has an impact on the whole region. So I guess 20% of the world's fresh water supply is contained in our five Great Lakes.
Wow, I did not know that. That's a lot.
Yep, we are definitely hoarding water, and it's probably not a bad thing. It's just nice and clean and pure, especially when you get up to Lake Superior, and kind of an amazing area. It's bitter cold up there right now, but the quality and purity of the water in that lake is just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I've always thought even Canada is a really nice place. I haven't spent much time up there, but I kind of think, well, the farther north you go, the colder it gets. So there's that downside.
Yes, and although if you go to either coast, you kind of get the benevolence of those big oceans that moderate the temperature fluctuations, and I'm sure there's somehow some kind of an analogy that we could relate to A Course in Miracles there, but the closer you get to the infinitude of the ocean of God, the better the temperatures will become, I suppose.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, and that's really what we're doing is we're pointing our ship arrow towards that divine, towards that love, towards that peace, and realizing that that's our deepest, fullest, truest goal. And we just do that again and again and again. And that's really what we keep talking about on these calls is how do we get to that point? How do we maneuver through the occasional icebergs that show up on our path so that we don't sink our ship and that we come into that experience of happiness, that experience of love, and that experience of our truth. So yeah, I think it's a good goal for us to have, and it's a nice analogy for our journey.
Yes, that it is. And we are looking at, we've been discussing the war against yourself, chapter 23 in the Course, for a couple of episodes now, where this is episode 102. That's kind of a landmark once again. And we were down to paragraph 5. And with our current times, boy, is this ever a timely paragraph. The arrogance on which the laws of chaos stand could not be more apparent than emerges here. Here is a principle that would define what the creator of reality must be, what he must think, and what he must believe, and how he must respond believing it. It is not seen as even necessary that he be asked about the truth of what has been established for his belief. His son can tell him this, and he has but the choice whether to take his word for it or be mistaken. This leads directly to the third preposterous belief that seems to make chaos eternal. For if God cannot be mistaken, he must accept his son's belief in what he is and hate him for it. So we're building a huge case of, God looking for revenge, God being a God of hellfire and damnation. And there are a lot of passages throughout not only the Bible, the Old Testament, the Jewish Testament, the New Testament, the Christian Testament, and the Quran, the three Abrahamic faiths, that really pursue this theme of a revengeful God who is demanding bloodshed and holy wars and all sorts of chaos.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what we get as we read this section in the text is we see this description of this insane, creator. But what Jesus is telling us so clearly is that we're the one that made up this idea of vengefulness. We're the ones that have created this thought system that we then pin on God. So you could say that this idea of a mean and angry God started within our own mind. And then we put it on God and said, this is what you have to be. You have to be this punishing, fearful, cruel creator. And then we have to run away from it. So we basically made up this story. We put this mask on God, and then we thought it was real. And because that is so painful, a part of us has been running away from this thought within our mind for all like eons and eons. And what we're realizing now is that it's not the truth. And we can start to say, okay, that's really preposterous. Since God is love, God is truth, God is joy, this idea that God could really want anything bad for us, it just doesn't make sense. And then we can start to say, well, do I want to hold on to this idea? Or maybe I can think about tossing it in the trash where it belongs.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that we do have this lingering desire to punish ourselves for a crime that we have imagined ourselves having committed. And that's how insidious it becomes. It just loops around and compounds, and then we project it into the outside world. We see situations like we've got in, the political realm right now, where venomous hatred is being engendered in all directions. And it's all because we have this need to not only punish ourselves, but to usher ourselves up to the threshold of death and push ourselves over. So that's kind of a dramatic interpretation of this world, but it nonetheless is real. And that's where we have to get past our tendency to gloss over things and to look at things realistically.
Yeah, I think this whole section, it really delves into sort of the false workings of the mind, and that these aspects of us need to be seen so that we can question them. That if we really saw them as they were, rather than as we set them up, then we would see that they're flimsy, that there is no substance to them. But as long as we're investing our belief in them, they really seem to fortify this very frightening worldview. And it's this worldview that, again, we see outside of us every day. We see, we see the news, and it seems to always be showing us separation, attack, violence, condemnation, one person, one group, one nation fighting against another. And it's heavy. It's really heavy. But what we start to see is that it's really just a reflection of this idea of death, of murder, and that the very idea of death is something that is not true. It's something that we can begin to question. We can begin to relinquish our belief in. And in so doing, we become more and more peaceful. We become more and more happy. We become more and more free. So it's not always an easy process, and I think, but it is a helpful process. And the good news is that we always have help in going through these things and looking at these dark parts of the world that are reflections of the dark parts within us. We always have help, and if we remember to ask for that help, it does make all of this accomplishable and doable, even if it doesn't necessarily feel smooth or easy at times. It is something we can do.
Yeah, it is. It is an interesting thing how so easy it is to get into that mode of projection, because There are so many triggers we have set for ourselves, or our ego has set up for ourselves. It goes on here to say, see how the fear of God is reinforced by this third principle. Now it becomes impossible to him to turn to him for help in misery. For now he has become the enemy who caused it, to whom appeal is useless. Nor can salvation lie within the Son, whose every aspect seems to be at war with him and justified in its attack, and now is conflict made inevitable beyond the help of God. For now salvation must remain impossible because the Savior has become the enemy. That's pretty much self-explanatory there. You don't really need to into that one too deeply. It's just kind of like the old baseball bat on the side of the head revelation. Is like, bang, that is it. We have created an image of God that terrifies us and keeps us from attaining that redemption that we so desperately desire.
Yeah, so this very concept is why so many students of spiritual paths of different kinds, whether it's a student of a course or not, find that there's a certain amount of conflict and resistance in our practice. Because on a very, very deep, true level, we want to know the peace of God. We want to know our truth. We want to know our immortal being. But then this other aspect of us is very attached to this fearful image of God. So on one hand, we want to go towards God. On the other hand, we think God is this awful enemy that we need to hide away from and run away from. And so it's like there's only a tug of war that's possible while we're still holding on to both of those beliefs. And that's why Jesus talks about us having a split mind, because our mind is attached to both beliefs. And it leads to this state of inner conflict and inner struggle. But the good news is that only one of these beliefs is true. God is not vengeful. God is not punishing. God is not unkind or cruel. And if we are willing to question this idea, we will come to this knowledge that it's not true, and that God is only loving and beautiful and pure. But it does require looking at, and this is also part of why it's challenging, is if we think God is punishing and upsetting and vicious, and the path through this is looking at that belief, it's sort of like we think we're being led to the slaughter, when really we're being led through a false image that death is even possible. And so I think part of our kind of guiding principle as we explore these ideas is to be very compassionate, very kind, to not be pushing or pressing or making ourselves have this knowledge that God is only love, because we will only relinquish this when we're ready. So we do need to question it. We do need to hold it up to the light of truth. But eventually, it's really going to kind of unfold in its own time. So there's another beautiful line in the text that says, infinite patience produces immediate results. And when we can really be very patient with our own process and patient with our unwillingness, then we find we're actually able to move through it more easily.
Very true. And, in a lot of ways, Barrett, what's going on is it's like an 8-year-old child has a dream where they do all the things that their parents have told them not to do. And then they wake up and they feel hideously guilty. And they're often that their parents, look at them with a little bit of curiosity. Why are you acting, in that shameful way? And, the child says, well, in my dream last night, I did this or I did that. And the parent would laugh at that and say, well, that was in your dream and that's not real. And I think that's what the whole Course in Miracles is it's that communication from our parent into the dream world we inhabit to help us awaken from this nightmare that is just has become incomprehensible at this point in the evolution of the human experience.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why I think using this analogy that we're waking up is so perfect, because we're really waking up from a nightmare. And a lot of times we're not seeing it fully as a nightmare, but then at times the world really reveals its true colors to us. And we see the viciousness, we see the pain, we see the awfulness that is really woven into this world of time and space. But we start to let it be used for another purpose. If we let it be used for that atonement, that awakening, then we're really handing it to the Holy Spirit, and we're letting Him be the determiner of how this unfolds. So as we keep going in this section, a couple paragraphs down, Jesus says, the ego values only what it takes. This leads to the fourth law of chaos, which, if the others are accepted, must be true. This seeming law is the belief that you have what you have taken. So another's loss becomes your gain, and thus it fails to recognize that you can never take away save from yourself. So really what we're getting here is this idea that we think duality is true, and that what one person has, another person loses. But that's really impossible in a state of oneness. There can never be loss. There can never be abandonment. There can never be less than, because there is only sameness. And what we're doing is by seeing it like this, we're starting to question this dualistic thought system. This thought system that says there's God and then there's something else. So if there's something else and I'm not God, then I must be the opposite of God. So if God is happiness, then I must, be unhappiness. If God is love, then I must be unloving. And if we really look within ourselves, we start to see these ideas and these beliefs about ourselves. But again, we can start to question them and say, I don't necessarily need to believe this. I can find, a better perspective. So you could say that a lot of our work with the Course is really bringing all of our ideas forward and sorting out the false from the true. But the good news is that we don't need to make that determination. That Spirit within can make that determination for us. Our job is really to be willing to question these ideas that we have within us, because it helps us to bring them forward and then to eventually to let them go.
That is absolutely true. And, this whole process of objectification, that is truly the playground of the ego, because it's so easy to slide into that sense of this guy's got this and I need that and woe is me, and live in that state of consciousness, then you're going to be seeing that experience repeated in all directions in an infinitesimal paradigm. So we really have to look at the rhetoric that's going on in our surroundings right now, where we are developing a culture of hoarding and a culture of withdrawing and a culture of fear of our neighbors. And we have to constantly be alert to that and to rebuke that. That was one of the things that Jesus was quite good at, is that capacity to rebuke the illusion, to send the devil dragging on back to his cave. And that really is what we are called upon currently in these times to do, is to rebuke the idea that, number one, somebody who lives down the street from us is plotting against us, and that they are living on, handouts from the state while I'm sweating and toiling and trying to make my little world a little more manageable. All of that dialogue that we see in every street corner, keeping us entrenched in the idea that we could even have needs and wants and desires, because once you have recognized that you have God within you, that you are a part of God, then all of your needs are immediately comprehended in a whole different way. You start vectoring off in a whole different direction.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect description of this switch we're always being asked to make, which is when we notice that we're feeling any sort of lack, any sort of dis-ease or unease, then we can switch into an experience of peace. And it's not always like we want it and we feel it, but just realizing that there's a choice here, that somehow if I'm feeling upset, that I know that I'm somehow choosing a perspective that isn't loving, that isn't kind, to realize that there is something within us that can make this decision more and more regularly. This is the work. It's coming over and over and over again, back to that point within us that has the ability to take Jesus's hand, to take Spirit's hand and say, you know, I want love, I want kindness, I want peace. That's what I really want here. And it's again, it's a habit, it's a muscle that we have to work on, and we develop it and we strengthen it, and it deepens. And just like if we were working out our physical muscles, the good thing is that if we do that on a regular basis, it's there for us when we need it. That inner strength is there for us to rely on. And so just remember that as you're doing all this work, you are making progress, and you are helping yourself, so that each time another scrap of fear comes up, you can say, you know, I've gone down that road before. I know that it leads to suffering and pain. I want the loving path. I want the loving choice here. And to know that that choice is always there for you whenever you want to make it.
Yes, it becomes easier and easier as we continue to advance, and the world around us, I think, probably becomes more shrill as we are stepping away from accepting it. So, you know, for everybody who is a student of the Course, you are definitely going to stir up a lot of inner conflict with the ego. And you have to recognize that the Holy Spirit and the presence of the Christ really is the only way to get through all this. And then it becomes not so much an easy journey, but it becomes a journey of assurance, because then you can see how each situation that arises is deflected away from you, and you can walk through the different low points as well as the high points in life without getting thrown off balance. You can stay steady on the middle path and negotiate your way through this terrible world. Because as it continues to say here, it says all of the mechanisms of madness are seen emerging here. The enemy made strong by keeping hidden the valuable inheritance that should be yours, your justified position and attack for what has been withheld, and the inevitable loss the enemy must suffer to save yourself. Thus do the guilty ones protest their uninnocence. Were they not forced into this foul attack by the unscrupulous behavior of the enemy, they would respond with only kindness. But in a savage world, the kind cannot survive, so they must be taken or else be taken from. So they must take or else be taken from. Pardon me. So that pretty much is a synopsis of what we're living in.
Yeah. Just turn the TV on if you want to see all that. But then if we're really honest, we can look at our daily lives and see the ways that we play out these roles too. And that's really where our greatest gains can be, is in noticing the ways that these dynamics play out in ourself, in our relationships, in our communities and workplaces. And to say, you know, I'm tired of that old way. you know, as Bill and Helen said to one another, you know, there must be another way. There must be a better way. So let's find that better way in our lives, and realize that that's what this is all for. That this is for us, again, taking that ship and sailing it back towards that peace, back towards that love, and really away from the fear and the unkindness, to know that that's our real purpose here, and to let today be that, to be that opportunity to live from that place. So yeah.
Yes, I think that really is kind of a good point to bring everything to a conclusion here as far as episode number 102 is, you know, as you go out and go zipping around your particular corner of the universe, whenever you see those conflicting elements, whenever you are confronted with a swastika scribbled on somebody's bedroom wall or whatever, you know, you really have to be able to step back and forgive that, because you need to own it. It was a part of me that made that illusion, and I'm going to forgive myself, and I'm going to recognize the Christ within those people over there, and it's the same Christ that I am.
Yeah, we all are Christ, and remembering that is the deepest purpose. So this has been really good reminder for me, as well as a really fun conversation to have with you today, Chris. So I'm glad we've connected, and just a reminder that a little bit further down the road, Chris and I will be having some more in-person Step into the Light meetings about A Course in Miracles. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Yes, it's coming up soon, and just as spring is on the horizon, everything is going to be thrusting through the snow and through the earth, and we'll see daffodils and all sorts of wonderful things before long.
All right, Chris. Well, this has been great. I look forward to talking with you next week.
Yes, much love to you, Barrett, and
Right back
we'll
at
be
you.
speaking to everyone soon.